the mental, emotional, like the relationships, that their job, their finances, their family, everything changes. And it's beautiful to see how that connects with the body. So yeah, that's what we do in a nutshell.
Awesome. Allison, you want to share some about your office and your practices?
Yeah, I love hearing Drs. Abetelli talk about what they do. They can break it down into such easy to understand terms, and I think that it makes so much common sense to us, but it's not the way the Western healthcare system, it's a totally different language that we have. And what I do is I practice acupuncture, which is a branch of Chinese medicine, and it's also a completely different language. So we're kind of saying the same thing in different ways. My background is actually in Western medicine. I was a biology major at Northeastern University to start for my undergrad. And while I was there, I was on the pre-med track, and I was a medical assistant for 6 years at a busy pediatric office. And it was during that time I realized I didn't want to be involved in Western healthcare. I didn't like how the patients would really only get 15 minutes to, stay with the doctor when they were sick. I didn't feel like it was enough time, or they were really getting to the root of the problem. They would oftentimes be prescribed a prescription medication, and sometimes it would work, but more often than not, the patients would be coming in the next week or even a few weeks later with the same sort of ailment or a totally different set of symptoms. And I thought this just didn't make sense to me. We had 8-year-old, 10-year-old kids that had health records this big. So it was before electronic healthcare records, so we could see their paper charts. And they'd have a piece of paper for every doctor's visit they had. And some of these, 8-year-old kids would have 2 charts already. So I thought this just isn't really, it's healthcare, but it's not really keeping people healthy. So I went looking for, a different way to sort of practice. And at that point in time in college, I knew what acupuncture was, but I didn't know anything else about it. But I started getting treatments, and my first treatment I went into, I thought I was pretty darn healthy. I just wanted to see what it was all about. But I remember I felt really, really good afterwards. And I kept going back because I kept feeling pretty good. And I got like a treatment a week for a couple months. And it was during the course of the couple of months that I realized that I was waking up feeling really refreshed, that I had energy, after my classes to keep studying, and I would be waking up with energy to go work out before class. Most notably to me, my PMS symptoms weren't as bad, and I didn't get in a fight with my boyfriend. So that was kind of what I realized is there's really something here. So I started learning more about it, and then I realized that it was just fascinating to me. It made a lot of common sense. In Chinese medicine, it's a language to explain the body, but you can apply it to anything in life, really the seasons of life. So it's a beautiful way to look at the world. So I never looked back. So I got my master's in acupuncture at Southwest Acupuncture College in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and where I learned traditional Chinese medicine. And then I had my first professional job as an acupuncturist working on cruise ships. And I got to travel the world. I spent half the summer in Cuba, and that was really great. But what was even better was I got to see the real power of acupuncture by working on cruise ships, because I got to see people every single day or every other day for the duration of the whole cruise, which would be either a week or 2 weeks' time. So that's how the medicine really works best. And you could see people that would come on the cruise ship with pain that they've had for years. And after getting treatment on a daily or every other day basis for a couple of weeks, they walk off the ship without this pain. And you got to see what styles of treatment worked and what styles didn't work. And it was really, really profound. So I had a lot of fun, but I decided I wanted to be back on the mainland. So I moved closer to home. And started a business of my own about 3 years ago here in Keene. It's called Basic Balance, and was able to expand a couple of times, and just recently moved into a location right across the street from the library. So thank you so much, Dr. Clerkin, for bringing us all together, and thanks for tuning in. And I hope that you're as interested about what we do as we are.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Rebecca, you want to chime in?
Sure. So my name is Rebecca Montrone, and I grew up here in Keene. My dad is compounding pharmacist and his father as well. So people who are in the Keene area know all about that. And I became really interested in holistic nutrition when I was about 16 years old, and my mom was a real Adele Davis fan. So anybody who knows Adele, let's cook it right. Let's have healthy children. Let's be, whatever. She wrote a bunch of books, but my mom had the book, Let's Have Healthy Children. And Adele was a biochemist, and one of the things she did was she worked with ranchers. And she noticed how careful ranchers were with prenatal diet for their cattle because they knew that was their livelihood. And she contrasted that with the average diet of a pregnant human woman. And this whole book spun from it. And it was a wonderful book. And it really hit me that we have so much more control over our health than we think we do if we know what to do. And the whole idea that I'm very passionate about preconceptual and prenatal health because that's when you have complete control. And that's when the child's constitution is formed. And you can, once you deliver a child with a good constitution, it's like granting them it's kind of like the ultimate, you reach your genetic potential. You're at the state where whatever your genetic potential is, you're at the top. And so now it's like having this very, very vast bank account. And so, when you get into your years where you're eating crappy food and you're doing things like that, it's coming down a little bit, but your constitution is holding you up. And then likewise, if somebody is born with a poor constitution, you can, after that birth, you can do all the right things as far as diet and nutrients and things like that, but you're never going to change that base constitution. That really affected me as a child. And then my mother, the one who got us into all this stuff, ended up with Alzheimer's at 49 years old, started manifesting symptoms. This was back in 1979. And so my passion became even more so. How do we use nutrients? How can we use, and this is my great passion right now is the whole field of epigenetics. If you know what your genes aren't doing for you, go in and do it another way. And most of the time it involves, I would say in my area, but not, this is why I love our panel, because you're doing it in different ways, but you're also circumventing genetic predispositions. But what I use is what is known as orthomolecular medicine, which is using nutrients in the right nutrients in the right forms for the individual based on their genetic makeup. And I think the sky is the limit. Most of my clients who have the most severe health pictures have a certain genetic defect called compound heterozygous, and I'm not going to get into all the details. But anyway, I followed Adele Davis when I was pregnant with my daughter. I did everything she said to a T, and I did not waver, not one day. And people thought I was going to give birth to a monster because of all the vitamins and things. But she had a super healthy life. She was at the top of her class. She doesn't have allergies. She didn't need braces. And I don't mean to sound, cavalier about it, because there are reasons behind all of this kind of thing. But when we did her genetic testing, she has that worst defect. And yet that's epigenetics. That's the beauty of epigenetics, because all of these nutrients and things overcame that problem. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited by our systems, the way we're created, the way we're made, the way we can maintain health, and we can recover if we know how.
Awesome. So, guys, thank you so much, Rebecca. I was paying attention to what each of you talked about, some of the things, they do sort of intertwine with everything we do. My story is, I am a chiropractor as well, and actually have practiced the same type of work as Dr. Abetelli. Amazing work, seen so many lives change with it. I happen to run into some challenges, health challenges of my own, and basically by my early 30s, and by the time I was in my mid 30s, I was into major autoimmune disease, joint swelling, and really to the point where I could barely function anymore. And I spent over a decade just looking for answers, like trying to find out what is going on here, and trying many different modalities. I had lots of opportunities, and I could never get. I had this one question in mind, was like, what is the root cause of what's happening here? And I would go to these different practitioners. They say, well, let's try this and see what happens. And what happened was I just kept getting worse. And I finally, through all that research, figured out how to find out what was going on underneath the surface. And once I was able to do that and find out, oh my gosh, my spleen is toxic with mercury, and I've got these bugs there. And it enabled me to take the steps to get myself better. And, so I've been able to sort of put my life back on. And I honestly wouldn't be here if I didn't do that. But some of the concepts we're talking about here, like Dr. Tecia, I think, was talking about stress, and Dr. Matt was talking about stress. When we're in stress mode, for instance, the frontal cortex goes offline. Like, our resources move away from the frontal cortex and into our more survival part of our brain. And that's important because the frontal cortex is where we make decisions and make changes. Like, every time I eat a McDonald's hamburger, I feel sick. And, that frontal cortex allows you to say, wait a second, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to take a different action. And ultimately, if we continue to repeat the same actions, whatever, on a personal level or on a countrywide level, then we would expect to have the same outcomes. It's kind of, it's kind of interesting. I'm driving around town and noticing it's kind of like a ghost town, except for the line at the McDonald's drive-thru. It was as big as it ever was, right? So, and then, you also mentioned, like Rebecca mentioned, your base constitution. One of the things I think that's happening in our country is that if mom is malnourished, baby starts out malnourished. They go through life, grow up, and then they have a baby. That baby is malnourished too. So it's not just our elderly who are kind of falling apart now, but it's really, 30% of the children in this country now have chronic illness. So there's something wrong with that baseline here. And I think that's what makes us so vulnerable. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was empowerment. I think Rebecca mentioned this as well. In order for us to be empowered, that means we have to know what to do. We have to be able to gain knowledge and wisdom. And we are our own best doctor. Like, no one can fix you. And that's one of the things, in our practice, because I had to learn this myself, it's not just one thing. It's not just one treatment that's going to be your savior. It's realizing that, you have to handle your stress and upgrade your system. And you have to be aware of your food as well. And you have to be aware of the personal care products and all the other toxins that are in your life. And you have to sort of put that together in a ball if you really want to have health. One of the things I remember is, like, when I was going through the process of trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with my body, I was looking for the cause. And I don't know if I ever found the cause, but I found many causes, many things. And it's almost like they pile up on you one after another. And it's the cumulative effect of all these things that weigh you down, because your body, as you're saying, is very resilient. It can come back from a lot. It's amazing what people can do themselves and still, live.
Yes.
But it's the cumulative effect of all these things that eventually break us. And so, our approach is to really look at the big picture and cover as many bases as we can, or at least the things that are most crucial, and teach our clients how to become aware so that they're making different lifestyle choices. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if the person comes to any one of us and we magically fix them with whatever they do, but then they go back in their life and don't make any changes and don't do anything differently,
right,
guarantee that they will be in the same place. So
exactly. I'd like to just comment on that, because that's what I say when I'm working with somebody, for instance, with cancer. The things that we use to help fight cancer also change the terrain. Okay, so if you don't change what went on in the body in the first place so that cancer had opportunity, then you can kill that cancer. you might be able to kill that cancer. You might be able to kill it with chemo and radiation. And I'm not saying anything against those treatments. But what I'm saying is if you don't change the terrain, then the next shoe is going to fall. And so I think that's what Dr. Clerkin was just talking about is, you know, if you just go back, if you fix something and you just go back to everything being the same way, you haven't really improved yourself. You've just jumped over a hurdle, one of many that you're going to just continually have in your life.
Yeah, and you know, Allison alluded to this as well. And there's nothing wrong with Western medicine, but it has a purpose, and the purpose is to really reduce symptoms. And sometimes that may be necessary to keep you alive. Mm-hmm. But as you're saying, Rebecca, you have to begin to look at the big picture. Otherwise, you're just going to keep repeating that same strategy of continuing to suppress your symptoms, and then they just keep coming back. And that's why when people get on, you know, medications for blood pressure or cholesterol or heart disease or diabetes, they're on them for life. Like it never changes because if you don't change that underlying situation.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in hearing one from Allison on, you know, energy, because I think my perception, at least of your profession, is it has a lot to do with energy in the body, and we work with that too. And also Matt and Tecia about really like flexibility in our body and how that relates to flexibility in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so we talk about energy in Chinese medicine, but it's really a very loose translation of what we're actually, our vocabulary. So thousands of years ago in China, they realized that we have these pathways that run through the body. And what's in these pathways is what they call qi. And qi is it's a totally different language here, so bear with me as I figure out how to translate it. But it's like the beginning of time created everything, right? It's the Tao in Chinese philosophy. And because energy can't be created or destroyed, it can only be changed forms. You have energy in all these different ways. You have ethereal energy, which is like a universal consciousness, down to the energy that is a very, you know, thick, substantial substance. So you have this qi in our bodies, and there's lots of different types of it, and it's always constantly moving in the body. And the whole goal of acupuncture is to get this free flowing circulation of qi or energy. So being humans and being in the society that we live in, and just because of life, we have imbalances in our qi. So we have more energy over here and less energy over here. And so we use acupuncture needles, which are stainless steel needles. They're pretty much conductors of electricity, and we can rewire the body so that we can bring it from areas where there's more of it to areas where there's less of it and get it moving again. Because it's when it's stuck, then that causes a whole cascade of different problems down the line, depending on what organ systems and whatnot. But yeah, so we do work with energy, but I think energy, it's really doesn't do the word justice for what we're really working with.
Awesome. I learned something today.
Yeah.
So Matt, what do you guys have to say about that? Because I'm interested in that subject.
Sure. So yeah, a couple of different things on that. Obviously, you know, we acknowledge energy as sort of what our, you know, universe and very creation is made of. We acknowledge it can't be created or destroyed. It can only change shape. And as that, what a tremendous opportunity. You asked about, you know, flexibility. And I think that that's a really great thing to talk about in terms of the body and also the life that we're experiencing at the same time. And also that acknowledging that when we are flexible, we're in a state where we can basically have access to higher, it's not linear, but a more complex and expansive, inclusive decision, whether that's physiological or emotional or mental, as you put. We talked about the frontal cortex or the frontal lobes. We call them the angel lobes because that's where compassion, through love, understanding, tolerance, all these things that we have throughout history in our greatest stories that are these amazing guiding lights for how to be with one another. They reside in that part of the brain. It's really neat to watch a live scan when someone is accessing those things and see it. Now, the interesting thing about that part of the brain, when we focus on the neurology here in the office, is that in terms of complexity and operating system, Dr. Tecia made mention of getting a cell phone upgrade. So absolutely. What are the sort of physiological ones and zeros that we're able to put in place to create a higher function? So when we talk about this frontal cortex, these angel lobes, and the ability to access this higher thought, we're talking about a complex operating system that frankly requires a ton of energy to run. So it's a system that needs to have everything else functioning at its optimum in order to be able to have access to. So flexibility then comes down to what we have access to in the body. And what we are all very aware of and have experienced here in this society, it's of course exaggerated now, but the idea that we're either in a sort of like fear or protective state, or we're in more of a growth and adaptation state, which would also lend itself to being more flexible. And Becky, I love what how you mentioned the epigenetics, really the study of what turns genes on and off. And we know that our state plays a huge part in that also.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so think of it this way, a system can be in one of two states. It can either be in a state of protection and defense, or it can be in a state of growth and flexibility. It cannot be in both states at the same time. It doesn't matter if it's a human being or one of the flowers on the windowsill.
Yeah.
It's either in a state of growth or it's in a state of protection. And I think that we need to look at that first if we're going to talk about flexibility, adaptability, resilience, and the opportunity to have vibrant health.
Yeah. One of our mentors, one of our mentors, this sticks with me so much over the years, but Dr. Don Lepstein would say the degree of flexibility that we have in life is proportional to the degree of flexibility that we have in our body. And so if we're like this, we can't deal with other stresses, but if we're, oh yeah, sure, whatever, we can be more flexible to life.
Yeah. I think when something like this happens, we're all vulnerable. Our health is vulnerable because we live we live with mortality. So we all are going to die someday, and that's going to happen. But I think when something like this happens, that vulnerability seems like we're more vulnerable, even if we might not be more vulnerable. In other words, if I'm a smoker, I might know that that's going to lead to lung cancer. But if I really want a cigarette right now, I can put it off. I can just say, well, I'll have this one, but I'll quit tomorrow, or I'll do whatever, because it's not imminent. It's not my lung cancer. I can fantasize is down the road. And I think when something like this happens, what happens for a lot of people is they have not really confronted that type of looking at life and death. And I think something like this kind of dwarfs what's really killing our population, are these chronic diseases that have roots in not caring for ourselves properly, whether because we don't know how, we don't have the resources, or we don't care. And I think this is a time for us to look at health and say, hey, my clients have been asking me, what do I do? What do I do to protect myself? Well, I'm like, dude, you've been getting vitamin for the last 2 years. You've been working with me every day in your multi. You're getting zinc, selenium, vitamin D, vitamin C. You're on glutathione. You're on this. You're on that. You're there. These are things people are like scrambling for right now. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I'm like, hey, chill. You're already doing it. So being prepared. But you weren't doing it because you thought this might happen. You were just doing it because for other reasons. And it's good for your health. And it will stand by you.
Yeah, I think, obviously what we chose as the name for our group, a Proactive Health Collective, is the idea that we do sort of, we're not in reality with our health a lot of times. We sort of put it off and like, oh, it's okay. Well, my digestion doesn't work that good, but that's no problem. I can just take some Tums for that, or I'm in pain every day, but I can live with it. And we don't really realize that these are what I call the check engine lights that are on, that are telling us, hey, something's really wrong here. And then a lot of times we don't act until there's a major crisis. And so again, collectively, if you look around where there's a major crisis and we're acting, we're scrambling and trying to like, what do we do? Let's just, sequester ourselves in our house. And it may be that we need to do this in the short term, but what if another virus comes around next year or the year after? Are we going to do the same strategy? And then what if it happens 2 years from now? So we have to start looking at it in a proactive way and realizing also that symptoms aren't what's wrong with us. Like when you have any symptom, like I'm coughing, that's not what's wrong with us. That's what the body is trying to do to right what's wrong with us, to get out whatever it is.
Right.
And so we go around trying to suppress our symptoms, thinking that that's the problem, but they're really the body's solution. The body's an amazing thing. And I guess, part of it is if we can begin to listen to our body and have a languaging there and understand that it's and communicating with us like, oh, I need to change something. I need to do something differently. I think there's a lot of power in that and not waiting until, and then also, but what you're talking about is like, when you take care of yourself, like I'm immunocompromised, right? I'm in that category. Am I afraid of the virus? I'm not. I mean, I'm doing, we have to do all we have to do to protect other people, but I'm not in fear because I know that I can protect my body, even though my body sustained damage in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I'd like to bring up about all of us together, why this is really cool that we're doing this is because we do share in the care, all of us, of some people. And I had a woman who came to see me a couple of years ago for something called temporal arteritis, and she was on prednisone and trying to get her inflammation markers down and things. And she recently started seeing Dr. Matt and Dr. Tecia, and she's like ecstatic. She's like on cloud 9. She comes up the other day and she's like, I feel so well. Spiritually, physically, emotionally, because you were dealing with, she had some real pain issues as well. And I have another gentleman who is seeing you, Allison, and like just raves that the neuropathy in his feet is, so I love that we have one another. I have others that are going to see you, Dr. Clerkin, and really love your staff and everything you have going on over there. And I love that none of us have to be able to do it all. We have each other to say, hey, look, I can help you with this part, but this, this person can do that, because how we address the body's health isn't just vitamins, nutrients, and herbs. It's also these energy things. It's also the spine. It's the nervous system. It's all of this. And, I'm just so happy that we're doing this together.
You're talking about a holistic approach, I think.
I think so.
Imagine that.
A lot of time my patients, when they come in, they want to know, okay, I'm like, all right, so here's what we did with acupuncture. Here's some nutritional suggestions for you. And I think a probiotic's a good idea. And so often they say, well, then how will I know what's working? I'm sure that you
know.
And it's such a black and white mindset that Western medicine has conditioned us to wait for there to be something wrong and then to try one thing and fix it. And what we're really trying to do with this proactive health collective here is just kind of instill the idea to you that it's everything. It's your exercise, your mind state. If you can move the energy in your body with acupuncture, but you can also support that with network spinal analysis. And then you can take the right herbal supplements, and all of them together are going to help your body. And also, it's not that you don't need a main complaint to come.
Yes.
You can just come and you can start where you are. And before you know it, you're going to feel amazing. And you didn't even know that you weren't feeling amazing because you felt that.
Exactly.
Allison, you bring up a beautiful point with that. And what's really cool is what people think. So think about energy in just this particular group, like how we feel and how we view the world, and how that energy can translate into how our patients feel, our practice members feel, and who we take care of. And as we amplify the field within us, we're going to amplify the field within the people that we serve. And who they interact with is going to be even more profound, right? So the energy starts to expand and lift, right? Because more energy equals more light. Less energy is dark, right? So there's a difference with that. And between what you guys are talking about, it's a really cool concept, because as we create the energy here amongst us, those who are listening and those who they talk to, after that will amplify also. And the more energy we have, Jean, you asked this question between stress and flexibility. And Allison, you touched on the chi, the life force within us. Like, our bodies want to do nothing more than heal. And it tells us, it screams at us when we're in pain. It's like our body screaming at us in Russian, and we can't understand it. And if you're Russian, it's Portuguese. And if you're Portuguese, it's in, English or whatever. Like, it's just your body trying to say something to you. And Jean, you touched on it. The symptom is a means for change. And we got to create more energy. And one cool thing we learned just recently within, understanding how messages work, you have electrochemical processes, but we also have learned that movement happens in a vibrational field. So like peristalsis, when we eat something and we swallow, peristalsis is that movement is vibrational. And if we're stressed and we're tense, it's going to literally change all the structural of the muscles and the organs, and even a deeper level to the cells, the cell structure. So if everything is coherent, right, and it's all supposed, and cells are supposed to be round, let's just say theoretically round, if there's a lot of tension, they're going to start to mutate and become like an oval shape. And if there's more tension, that vibration, that signal to get through is not going to get there. So you're not going to get the signal optimally, and that's going to decrease the energy. You're going to have less flexibility, not only within your cell structure, but that's going to play out in your whole body. So you're going to be in more defense. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if we create a more coherent, coherent energy amongst us, things can start to change and morph back into where they're supposed to be, whether that's through brain-body connection, whether that's through creating energy and life force balance, if that's supplementation and herbal processes, like through nutrition, through energetics. Like Jean, I know you work with some really cool energetic supplementation. It's all part of it. And there is, like, I know we wish that there was that one thing that would help cure everything, but it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. And that's why a team of healthcare practitioners who are on your side is so powerful. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful collection.
The analogy I like to use is a pot of soup, because just even like in maybe, like, say I have like recommendations for a client and they're like, well, how will we know which one is working? And I said, well, you could start out with carrots, just eat carrots for a month, see how that works. Then add the peas for a month, see how the combination works. Then add the onions, then add some meat and whatever. I said, these things, they all work together. It's like a pot of soup, or it's like a plate of food. Your salad and your veggies and your protein and your things like that. So it's not one thing that works. It is a synergy. And that's just how it is.
Cool. It is how it is.
We're getting low on time, and what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what our agenda going forward. I think, this was an opportunity for us to sort of introduce some ideas and introduce this team to you. We do want to be a resource to our community, and we are going to be doing this weekly for the foreseeable future. So we encourage you to come back. We're going to cover a lot of different topics. I think we could talk, one day we could just talk about stress, because there's so many things that were coming to mind about how that affects the body. And then, maybe we could get into maybe some more things about what people can do at home, or we could talk about nutrition specifically from a biochemical standpoint. So there's a lot of things, but for the audience out there, we have some questions which we're gonna cover here. If you're out there in the audience and you have some questions, please put them in the Q&A box. It's right at the bottom menu there. If we don't get to it today, we'll certainly get to it next time, or or maybe become the focus of a topic. But so if you're out there, please put some questions in. We would like this to be more an interactive thing, so that we're, like you might be out there thinking, well, I want to know about this. Certainly let us know, and we'll address that. So I'd like to take a couple of questions now, because there's a couple on there, and then maybe it'll spur some more questions. It'll certainly spur some more conversation. The first question from Mary Jane here is it safe to eat fresh vegetables like lettuce and spinach, is the first part of her question. And then she writes, or soak them in a bleach solution. Is soaking them in a bleach solution enough? Does anybody want to tackle this? Rebecca, do you want to tackle this one?
Well, I would say the bleach solution actually has a lot of validity to it when it comes to thinking of Anne Louise Gittleman, who was really big on that for getting rid of parasites and all kinds of things. So it's not, it's not full strength Clorox or anything. And I don't have the recipe in my mind. I don't do that. I personally am not worried about fresh fruits and vegetables right now. But I don't have anything more scientific to say about that, but I'm not shying away from them.
So here, a couple of words I would say on it. Absolutely, you want to eat fresh fruits and vegetables. They have, and people's diets vary differently depending on where they are in their state of their process and healing. Sometimes people's digestive systems are so messed up that they can't even have fresh vegetables because they're too sensitive, and they might have to cook their vegetables. But there's obviously advantages to fresh vegetables. Right off the bat, think of enzymes, and there's a sort of a formula of time and temperature as we cook foods that denatures them, and the longer, and the higher the temperature, the more that certain nutrients and things are going to get destroyed. Obviously we want to eat the cleanest foods we can, and you can check out like environmental working groups, Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, and there are certain foods that you really want to pay attention to, like strawberries are up on high on the list of things that are very toxic. They're very porous type of fruit, and they spray, and then because they're vulnerable, they spray a lot of fungicides and things on them, so they tend to be high on that list of things that are toxic, and in that case, cleaning them is probably not even going to do you any good. You want to just try to get an organic type of food, and there are some things that you can get away with. We don't we don't use a bleach solution either, and my only concern about that is you want to make sure if you do something like that you make sure you get the bleach cleaned off, because that would be challenging. Rebecca? I
would like to say, I think the participants' question is concerned with the COVID virus coming in on their food. In other words, is somebody handling my fresh vegetables and things? I don't know, but that's kind of what I was thinking where that question was coming from, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, maybe if that's the case, Mary Jane, if you're still on, you could just type that in and let us know if that's the case.
I mean, my feeling is, personally, I'm not concerned, but that's just me.
Yeah. Again, kind of going back to the idea here that, there's going to be things in our environment always, whether they're chemical toxins, whether they're pathogens like this that we're talking about, and you can walk on eggshells and try to stay away from everything in life, but it's going to be challenging. You're never going to be able to do it. You're never going to get all the toxins out of your life. And so what you can do on the positive side of that is strengthen your immune system. And again, I think we'll spend probably a day talking about that just specifically, but it's sort of strengthening your house so that you can deal with whatever things come in.
Yeah. And I would just circle back to when we're talking about organizational energy in the system and the system's adaptability and its flexibility when dealing with all these things. Because the truth is, we like to think of ourselves as these perfectly clean, biological systems, but we're not. And there's always a lot going on behind the scenes. Thank goodness, always an opportunity. And if we're thinking about it in terms of energetics, depending on how much energy we have available and what reach of the brain we're working with, and just to give it linear, to make it really simple, when someone's in having a fear response, just like forget everything and run, just, they're fight, flight, or freeze if they really don't know. They're running a very low part of the brain, so very low organizational energy. They're really in survival. So without getting into the neurology today, just know that if that's, let's say, all the way back, down on the brain stem, and that the brain actually continues all the way up like this to the frontal cortex's angel lobes, that this is all organizational energy. So low organizational energy and all the way up to high. So when we're in a lower state of organizational energy, because frankly, we're fried or we're in fear or whatever, we're stressed out, the ability to make the types of decisions are difficult. And what we do is that we start looking for, is this going to work or is that going to work? Is this going to be the right thing? Is that going to be the wrong thing, et cetera? And the truth is that we have the guidance that we need within the system. It's just a matter of increasing the energetic state and being able to drive a higher reach of the brain to be able to tap into that. That's something we get into in the office, and we have online programs about, but curious any other takes on that one.
Cool. Allison, did you have something?
No, I think you're spot on. And yeah, like you said, Dr. Clerkin, we all have parasites, fungus, bacteria on us, yeast, you name it. And I think at the end of the day, just strengthen your system so that you can give the power. Your body has so much power, and if you just give it a little bit of a nudge, then you don't have to make so many of these little decisions like, do my fruits and vegetables, what's contaminated, what's not. And that mindset is really going to cause so much stress and can do more harm than good. Whereas you come from an empowered viewpoint and you're really taking care of yourself and you're working proactively with your health, then you know that you can overcome these things. So I don't have anything specifically. I haven't really heard anything about the bleach solution or anything, but that was just my take on that.
Yeah. So yes, certainly, keeping our bodies strong is the number one thing we want to do. And it's not that we don't need to pay attention to these things in life. Obviously, you don't want to knowingly take in toxins or, stuff that is spoiled or whatever the case may be. You don't want to overwhelm your body, but you don't necessarily have to worry about everything either. So Cindy asked about what are your thoughts on fad diets, the fad diets that are out there, keto, Atkins, and fast metabolism. And I'll just say, to start with, this one is my experience in working with people in diets, and that's one of the things we do is sort of coach and counsel people on, what changes they need to make, is that there is no one diet that's right for everybody to start with. And I've also noticed that there's no one right diet that's right for everybody through their life. There might be different times when you need to maybe address some, like maybe if you're dealing with Lyme or some pathogens that you don't want to feed them so much sugar or carbohydrate because that feeds them. And so I think, all these diets have some validity to them, and they've been, I think, shown. I don't know the fast metabolism diet, but there's things about them that are good, but I just think, to think that there's one diet that's the diet, I think is a dangerous thing to go down. You got some thoughts on that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I agree. And it depends too on the person's goal. If I have somebody who really wants to drop weight, wants to burn fat, and we want to get them into that process of not having anything else to burn, but that you've got to take your fat cells now and convert them into energy, then that's a good place for a keto approach diet. It doesn't mean everybody needs to be on that diet. I really enjoy my oatmeal in the morning. I'm not trying to lose weight, but when I've wanted to lose some excess pounds, I can do that, and it works. But I totally agree. And my people with cancer will say, what about diet? And I'm not into all of that. I'm like, and this is, I think, for everybody. Minimal processed foods, limit your sugar. I mean, I think that's just general health for everyone. But if somebody likes, you know, to have some rice with their dinner and the other person wants to go completely keto and doesn't want that amount of carbohydrate, fine. But I don't like any of the trendy diets for cancer. The China study, that was, you know, their meat is bad or macrobiotics or anything like that. I'm just like, hey, look, sugar, cancer eats glucose. So limit your sugar, but limit your sugar anyway. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy, you know, a dessert once in a while. It means drop the processed food, the junk with all the hidden sugar and the inflammatory fats and things. Eat whole foods, whole fresh foods, and drop the stuff in boxes and stuff, and don't obsess over it, because I think you can obsess so much over your diet that it's counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, you know, just having basic principles, some basic understandings of, you need some adequate protein and, you know, and hopefully a clean source. You need to have adequate fat, like good healthy fats. A lot of times we get into this low fat stuff and we need fat. Our brain is made of fat. You know, our hormones are built, fat soluble hormones are built upon, you know, the building block of fat. And so there's some basic principles that you need to have. And just like you were saying, you know, you want to make sure you try to eat as clean and a wholesome diet without a lot of processed foods. And not that any one thing is going to be the end of you, or that if you have a dessert, that's the end of it either. You know, but just keeping some balance there, and you know, and
don't
also
let the dessert turn into an excuse to have another one the next day and the next day and the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things about sugar, you know, if you don't, sugar
Are you speaking from personal experience?
Oh, you bet. Well, I had pizza on Friday, so.
Yeah. I think with sugar, you know, sugar is a big thing because it, you know, again, in small amounts it's okay, but in excess amounts, it causes inflammation in the body. So if you've got an inflammatory type of thing, and I think when we talk about the immune system, we'll kind of get into that a little bit. It can cause a ton of problems. And so sometimes when you're down in the dumps with your health and you're trying to claw your way out and get yourself better, sometimes you do need to be a little bit more strict, or, you know, just kind of stay away from these things for a while. And then once you sort of built your health back up, then there's some leeway. And as Matt was saying, the danger in it is because, you know, it's almost like alcohol. Like some people can stop drinking and then, you know, like, and then they can have a drink once in a while and they're okay. And some people have their first drink and then boom, they're drunk, you know? And so sugar I've seen is sort of like that. Some people can have, you know, kind of get sugar out and then have it a little bit. And there's certain people, certain personalities, I don't know if it's their biochemistry, but they have that first thing of sugar and they're just, then they're off, you know, off the wall. So,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, to chime in from a Chinese medicine viewpoint, exactly what you're all saying. And I think it's, you know, the nail on the head when you say it's different things for different people and different times of your life. And the way that I use nutrition in my scope of practice is when I make a diagnosis, I will recommend that people incorporate foods that are going to rebalance their systems. So it's not actually eliminating these foods, but actually adding foods with the proper sort of properties that you need, if that's energetic. So if you have heat in the system, I'd say, why don't you try some peppermint tea, some watermelon, cucumber, things that are going to cool you down. If there's a diagnosis of like what we call in Chinese medicine blood deficiency, then beets or red foods, things with lots of iron, small amounts of organic meat. So
nice. I had a client asking me about that kind of thing, and I said, I'm not really good at that, knowing what are the constitutions. That's where you come in, like that Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, understanding the different, because the cool and the hot and all of that kind of thing is so fascinating to me. I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, it's just a different language, and I think you guys have, you know, you do the same thing in a different way. It all works. Yeah.
Okay, so you know, as time's running down here, you know, Rachel chimed in, said thank you to all of us, and you know, thank you for being here. Is there any truth to drinking hot liquids to combat getting COVID-19? And she's heard this from a couple of sources. And then she also wrote, next question, I like the idea of the panel covering more about dealing with stress and the changes our community is adapting to. Also, how can we boost our immunity? So for the second question, I think that boosting our immunity, I think we can spend a session on that.
Next
It's
week,
too
we
much
should
to get
do-
into right now.
Yeah.
Stay
So I
tuned.
think next week we'll probably
Yeah, thank you,
cover that.
Rachel.
And then we all know Rachel, we love her. And I don't know, I hadn't heard about drinking hot liquids. I think, obviously,
I haven't either.
And that's
You know,
not
there's
really our scope.
yeah, and there might be a temperature threshold for these viruses. And Mary Jane got back on because she had missed her question about the is it safe to eat vegetables like
yeah.
lettuce and spinach? And we talked a little bit about that. We I think collectively, we're going to continue to eat vegetables. I don't particularly use a bleach solution. I'm not really sure if that kills or doesn't kill a coronavirus, if that's where you're coming from this, Mary Jane. But certainly want to clean off our vegetables and sort of limit things that are coming in. But we also can't be walking around on eggshells with every little thing. So, and certainly if you do use some kind of a bleach solution, you definitely want to make sure you get it cleaned off of your foods because you don't want that going into your system. So, so I think that covers all the questions that we have right now. Again, for our participants, thank you so much for being here. We are going to do this again next week, and I think like we agreed, we're going to cover immunity. I think we're going to we definitely want to hear more questions from you all as our audience, because we want to speak to what you're interested in hearing about. But we would encourage you to come back on and be with us again, and certainly share this with your friends and let them know this is a resource in the community. We're going to continue this certainly over the next several weeks and maybe beyond that as well. Is there anything that anybody else wanted to close with before we close up the meeting?
No, just
I'd
thanks
like to-
everybody for being here. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to extend my gratitude, really. It's just wonderful to be in a community like this and to be surrounded by such proactive people. There are a number of people in attendance today who would be wonderful on this panel also. And I feel so lucky to be so rich in terms of who we share this amazing time with. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we do. We have so many resources here. It's easy for us to go into fear, but we want the community to know that we're here for you. Not necessarily as as a pitch to come into our office, but just to we're all connected here, and obviously, as we're seeing, when something is going down in the community, it affects us all. So this is our way of sort of contributing what we have, because we all want to do something, right, to help. And
Yeah.
I think this is what we've come up with, is we just want to be a resource for our community.
Yeah, flexibility is about connection.
There you go.
That's right. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to close it up. We're right on time here, 12:01, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. You can use the same link that you used to get on this week to get on next week.
All right, so long.
All right.
Peace.
Thank you.